punishment, it's Article 3. It's a torture article. And they were of the opinion that it's not only violates family life, but it's actually sort of torturing people, not only prisoners. So what we did, we took this judgment, we went and translated it very quickly into Russian. All the judgments of the European Court are published in 2 languages, 2 official languages, French and English. So now Russian. We went and translated it. We asked the journal, more or less official journal, Bulletin of the European Court of Human Rights, to publish this translation into Russian. It's a глянцевый такой журнальчик красивый. Made a copy of it and sent a request to the correctional colony to allow Korolyov's a conjugal meeting, not based on the Russian legislation, but based on this case, Poroshenko versus Russia. And we explained in this letter that it's actually applicable, it's enforceable, it's binding. But the head of the colony rejected and said it's impractical to allow conjugal meeting right now, because in 10 years they will have a meeting. Why meet right now? Just wait for 10 years. It's going to be fine. So we took this rejection, and went to Babushkin District Court once again to secure the right to conjugal meeting. So first litigation was about the right to artificial insemination, but we decided it's worth to continue, and now we have grounds on the Poroshenko case to ask for conjugal meetings. Meanwhile, Korolyov applied to the European Court of Human Rights. We didn't wait for the second trial to end, and we appealed to the Constitutional Court. And it's very interesting how we applied to the Constitutional Court. I still remember this day when I was composing the application to the Constitutional Court, and I thought, how I'm going to convince 19 judges of the Constitutional Court that 10 years ago, in the Kharkin case, in Poroshenko case, they were wrong. It's almost the same people now in the court as 10 years ago. How I can convince the judges that the legal position 10 years ago was wrong, now they have to correct their mistake. And I thought they're not going to listen to Korolyova, Veronika, or especially the prisoner, convicted lifer. They're not going to listen to me. I just decided I'm going to take the translation of the judgment of Poroshenko, scan it, recognize the letters, copy and paste it into my application. So I wanted to force 19 Russian judges to argue not with me, not with Korolyov, but argue with the judges of the European Court. If they want to reject the application, they have to argue with the judges of the European Court. They have to somehow come with the new arguments to overrule reasonings by the European judges. It was the most easiest application to the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court rejected the application. But the reason was not that the arguments were weak or false, but because they knew that we applied to the Babushkin District Court once again. They said that you have to go through the District Court first and then come back to the Constitutional Court. And we went back to the Babushkin District Court. Again, we had an argument based on Article 8 of the European Convention, but this time, not only Dixon versus UK. See, it's a weak argument. I mean, legally, it's very strong argument. It's a good argument. You have this case which interprets Article 8, and it's so obvious that these kind of people has a right to artificial insemination. But the problem is with the UK letters. You have to have it against Russia. It's just the attitude of Russian judges. But we have the Harashenko case right now, and it was against Russia. Good. We applied to the court in December. The first hearing was in February. And in the end of December, just before the New Year's, Supreme Court came up, the Presidium of the Supreme Court. You know, remember yesterday we talked about the Presidium of the Supreme Court. All the judges together came up with a review of the case law, including European Court of Human Rights. And they particularly referred to the Karashenko case. So that's the good direction to lower judges. That look, we paid attention to Harashenko case. You should do it too. So we brought this to the judge. We brought this copy of this to the judge. And then in February, we had a partial victory. The judge recognized the refusal as illegal. The refusal by the head of the colony. She said that it's illegal to refuse. But she didn't rule out that she didn't force the head of the colony to give them conjugal meeting. It's actually, we absolutely didn't expect any victory. And when she announced the judgment, really our hair was like this. But then when I heard the second part, I realized that the judge will not go against the head of the colony. This second part of the judgment means that Veronica has to go to this head of the colony with a new request and ask again. And then he can refuse once again, and then we have to go back to the court, appeal it again, and it's an endless process. But we had something at least. Then we went to Moscow City Court, not us, but the colony. This time they lost the case, and they appealed. But unfortunately, the Moscow City Court again referred to the Harkin's judgment of the Constitutional Court. May be limited in the possibility of having a child. Rejection. And we went back to the Constitutional Court. Meanwhile, we had, remember I said about 3 more cases? This is Andrei Harashenko. So after winning the case at the European Court, by the time he won the case, he already had conjugal meetings. Not because of the judgment of the European Court, but because of 15 years has passed. And his regime was changed, and he got the right to conjugal meetings. Unfortunately, by the time he got the conjugal meetings, not mother nor father could go to his prison because they were so weak already, old. Luckily, his son wanted to have contact with his father and continued going, and his brother. Rudiks, it's a very older family, older mother and father whose son was convicted for life. They couldn't go to this faraway colony, the same colony where Korolev is serving his sentence, because they're about 80, and the only summertime they have in Yamalonensk okrug is about end of June, July, and it's very expensive for the pensioners to go there. Each trip for one person costs about 40,000 rubles. And it's tickets, it's a hotel, and you're not going to see your child without bringing something to eat. But although they have a right to non-conjugal meetings, like through the window, they never used it because it's too expensive, it's too demanding, and all you have is just 4 hours. So you wanted to challenge this as well. And this is Alessia and Oksana Matsinin. I don't know why it's cut. You see. She's the wife of a lifer. This is the daughter, 4 years old. She never saw, at the time, 4 years old. And then she never saw her father. So they also were litigating similar cases that Karalyova. Matsinina, they lived in a faraway region, and our lawyers couldn't go there and help them, so we just instructed them how to litigate the case. So, and on the 15th of November 2016, Constitutional Court ruled in favor of Karalyova and Matsinina. So all these 3 cases plus Karalyova, they went to the Constitutional Court around the same time. September, October of 2016. But the Constitutional Court picked out only Karalyov's case and Matsinina. Unfortunately, there was no public hearing. And this is really unfortunate because 10 years ago, 12, when they decided the Kharkin case and Harashenko case, the Constitutional Court didn't have any hearing, no public hearing. They just discussed in closed chamber and delivered the judgment. This time the same, although they reversed their own legal position. What was bad for, although it's a victory for Karalyova, but only in regard to the conjugal meetings. The Constitutional Court didn't consider the facts of the case based on art. There was 2 sets of facts. They were demanding artificial insemination, assistance in this process, and conjugal meetings. The Constitutional Court, for some reason, decided just to consider conjugal meetings. So this was omitted. They changed the position of 2014, but didn't admit it in the judgment. They applied all these ECHR arguments. It's actually a very good judgment. You can teach students based on this judgment. You can teach students to international law, how it works in the national system. And the Constitutional Court itself allowed all lifers, not just Karalyova and Matsinina, but all lifers, 1 conjugal meeting per year. So even before the legislation changed, the Constitutional Court refused reconsideration of Karalyov's case. Usually when you win the case at the Constitutional Court, you have a right to go back to where you came from, Babushkinsky Court, and ask the district judge to reconsider the case. So we hope that if we won this case, we will go to the first Babushkinsky Court, first judge. It was actually the same judge who decided 2 cases, and ask her to reconsider the case on artificial insemination. But the Constitutional Court said no. And they awarded legal expenses, 10,000 rubles. Actually, it's interesting to know this, although it's not about bioethics, it's a legal courtside ethics. We spent enormous amount of hours on litigating this case. And when winning, you have a right to claim for legal expenses. So we sent all the documents to the Constitutional Court saying this amount of hours, and we claimed about 700,000 rubles. This is what we got. This is about worth of 1 hour of time. And this is very interesting because this is the message the judges of the Constitutional Court sent to lawyers like who litigated this kind of cases. By this 10,000 rubles, they say, if you want to come back to us with some other cases like this, keep in mind, that's what you're going to get. We are not going to reimburse any of your expenses. But now at the European Court we claim all the expenses, and we're going to get it. And we're going to show the Constitutional Court that they were wrong. The reason why the Constitutional Court changed their legal position, you might not be aware of some politics going on. Have you heard of the Yukos case against Russia? 2 billion euros were ruled to be paid by the Russian government to Yukos shareholders. Because of this case, the Russian Constitutional Court in 2015 came up with a judgment which said that the Constitutional Court has a right to decide which judgment of the European Court could be applicable in Russia and which could not be executed or not executed. In 2016, I don't remember the month, maybe springtime, so half a year before Korolev, the same Constitutional Court ruled on the case of Yukos that this judgment of the European Court is not executable in Russia. I think the reason why the Constitutional Court came up with on one hand, with a very good judgment. They refer to all the case law of the European Court. It's very good analysis. Because they wanted to show they want to show to the European Court, they want to show to the Council of Europe that they are good guys. They not only can rule judgments like in Yuka's case, but they also can come up with a judgment like Korolev. It's a very positive judgment. I think they didn't want to argue with the ECHR too. Remember that I said the arguments were not mine, not Korolev's, but by the European Court of Human Rights. And I think the Constitutional Court didn't really have a choice because the time has changed, and all this video that I showed you, and all the judges were aware of what's going on, what is that the litigation is going on, that the press is all talking about this, and the time has passed since 2004. In all the countries, members of the Council of Europe, 46 by now, plus Russia, 47. In all these countries, lifers has the right to conjugal meetings. And if they rule otherwise, they will be like the one country in all Europe which is so inhuman. But that's my kind of understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just giving my reasons to you. And if she goes to, I don't remember what was the city near Kharkov. She flew from Domodedovo to somewhere in the north, and then drove a taxi to Poselok Kharkov to meet her husband. So the judgment was in November 15th, 2016, and she went for a meeting in the end of January 2017. So before the legislation was changed. The correctional colony gave her the time for the meeting based on the judgment of the Constitutional Court. And actually they gave her the right time, the time which was good for her periods. Unfortunately, I won't tell you that she conceived a child. It's not a lucky story yet. It's very difficult to do this without artificial insemination. So consequences for the Constitutional Court. All the lifers and the members of the family receive this right. I have some information from other lifers who said that apparently they have this announcement system in prisons, in colonies, and there was an announcement in one of the prisons for lifers that now, because of this judgment, now they have a right to conjugal meetings. And there was a kind of uproar. Everybody was so happy about this. Not all the lifers has families left. Maybe half of them, but still. And also the colony started to build new dorms for conjugal meeting. So because more people, they have to accommodate more families now than before 2016. Therefore, they need more rooms, more dormitories. So why Korolyova is still at the European Court of Human Rights? Because still her claim for artificial insemination was not satisfied by any courts, not the Constitutional Court. We claim for violation of family and private life, fair trial. Fair trial, we particularly claim that judges of the Constitutional Court illegally omitted half of the facts. We ask for moral damages. I think it's about 6,000 euros for each applicant. It's not as much as in the Sablina case, but this case is not about moral damages. It's about artificial insemination. And of course, we ask for legal costs. In this case, it's particularly important to raise good amount of legal costs to show the judges of the Constitutional Court that what they did was not good. And we expect the judgment any day now. There's no way to learn when the European Court of Human Rights will rule on a particular case. They only send you an email about a month before the announcement, or 2 weeks before the announcement of the judgment. There is usually no public hearing. You don't go to argue the case. It's just all based on exchanges of legal documents. But it has been 3 years since we filed the case, and it should be soon. We asked to consider the case very quickly based on the fact that biological clock is ticking, but European Court of Human Rights is not so human. So I want to ask you to give us your thoughts on this statement. Lifers and family members may be limited in the possibility of having a child. Once again, yes, I agree for some reasons. And yes, no, I disagree. Let's go to this again, if you don't mind, and see. Maybe your judgment has changed after this lecture. So agree that it's okay to limit the right to conjugal meetings and artificial insemination, and disagree, it's not okay. Let's see who voted. Disagree. It's almost the same, right? No? Exactly the same. So my lecture didn't make any difference. But still, I'm happy that more people disagree with this statement. And if you don't mind, we go to this activity. Can you give reasons why do you think lifers and their wives must be allowed artificial insemination or actually prohibited. So not just voting yes or no, but why?
Again, it will be represented as a cloud of tags, right?
Sorry?
It will be represented as a cloud of tags.
Yeah. So, cloud of words. So give you you may give not just one word, but kind of a short phrase. You can give up to 3 suggestions, ideas. There are more people thinking. Switch it off for now. Are we done? Okay. 10 people voted. 3 more. So what do we have? Didn't deserve a complete family. They should have known. Punishment. Wives are not criminals. They are human. Have right to have child. Wives. Bad father can't rise. Lifeless child are dangerous. Lifeless child. Yeah. Should be kids. Expensive. Anyone wants to say something? Discuss this. For example, this one, incomplete family. How many complete families are right now? I mean, what are the statistics of complete families among free people?
But maybe the fact that the father is a terrorist could influence the child. How it's to live with the fact that your father is a life prisoner?
Okay, what do you do with the kids who were born before the sentence, but still children of a criminal?
One side they will know that maybe they will see that their father's a monster, But another point, they can say that their father was a good person, and maybe it will be some hope that the judgment wasn't correct. But now you have no opportunity to decide if this person was good or bad. Maybe if it's better when they have opportunities to meet before the situation.
Thank you. Anyone disagree?
I think it all comes down to whether you believe that the person who is imprisoned has any rights or not. I mean,
What about
I
free
mean,
people?
if it's a prisoner who is imprisoned for life, then he probably has done something really terrible. And this, I mean, some people out there believe that capital punishment should be executed in this country. And the ratio of such people is really large, and I think that, yes, once again, it all comes down to whether you think that the punishment is enough for them or not.
Okay. Thank you. Any other ideas?
I think the most important case is that a child doesn't deserve an incomplete family because it will be very bad for his psychology, and he won't be able to grow up as a person who is as happy as children with fulfilled families. So therefore, I think it's not good to have children in this case.
Okay, good. Can I ask you one question? According to statistics, there are more women than men, right? And if by the time of the good time to give a birth to a child, a woman didn't meet anyone, right? But she really wants to have a child. Shall we prohibit all those women, single women, still not married, to have a child for the reason that it's dangerous for the would-be child to grow up in an incomplete family?
Well, I think this is the worst case, but it shouldn't be prohibited, obviously.
Why shouldn't it be? It's the same danger to be raised in an incomplete family. Why we prohibit a prisoner's wife to have a child for this reason, but we allow other women who is not married.
But women who are not married, firstly, even if they have a child, they can be married in the future, for example, it can happen. Yeah, okay. And
the prisoner's wife also can marry somebody else in the future. It's potential possible.
But was it really the case? For example, if her husband is prisoner, she could try finding somebody else, or it didn't happen. I mean, here maybe it wasn't a situation that she didn't try to find another husband. Of course, if it was her last hope, I understand it, but I didn't get that it was right this in the story.
Well, thank you. But I don't have any correct answer. It's just trying to sort of challenge you, try to make you think. But probably this is not the best argument you can have. Let's see, what do we have here?
What I have,
Sorry?
what I have here, or
No, just somebody else.
um,
And we heard your argument. I think it's good, but I also think that there's a counter argument to this. Oh, another vote. What is the child attempt to improve the prisoner? Sorry? Yes? Why do you say this?
Because I suppose that it's one of the choices. One is the possibilities to improve your life, because you hope that when you will be free, maybe, or when you will have some contact with your wife, you can recognize about your child. You will have something good in your life, something good in use.
How many of you have a child?
Good question.
I mean, you don't have to answer, it's your private life, but really, I have a child, and the moment we have a child, it's really a life-changing experience. And it's not even a birth. Yes, it's very much, I wouldn't say stressful, but it's uplifting, and you're so much energized. But that's the process afterwards, when you raise the child, when you get the first emotions from your child, first words and sentences, and then some arguments, and the child starts to challenge you. And this is when you really start to change yourself. You are becoming a better man, a better woman. And it's probably good. I mean, I'm of the position that you have to allow them to have conjugal meetings and the right to artificial insemination. And for the same reason, that give them a chance. There's another reason that there's not official statistics that maybe 30% of life prisoners are not guilty. Like this, 30% of them not guilty, another 30%, 33%, they're convicted for life for crimes they committed, but they're not as, how can I say that?
severe.
It's too severe for the crime they committed. It's just injustice, as we say. And maybe 30% of the convicted criminals, lifers, they actually committed the crime. They deserve this punishment. That's another reason to think of. Also, potentially, any lifer can be free in 25 years. There's a right to УДО, условно-досрочное освобождение. It never worked yet with any lifers so far, although 30 years passed since the first lifer is in prison, but so father should be with the kid. It's also the same like incomplete family, right? To fulfill spouse's rights. When we litigated this case, all the journalists, they forget about the wife. They come to the court, they speak to the wife of the criminal. She is the main litigant, she is the main applicant of the case. She is the one who wants to have a child. But then you see, they interview her, and then you see the TV, and it's all about rights of a prisoner. They forget about the woman. Why do we forget about the woman? She's free. She didn't she didn't commit any crime. She wasn't even involved in any of his business. She didn't even know about this. Why she's being punished? The two videos that I showed, it's actually a good example. There were other videos of a different nature. If you have any other thoughts, please raise your hand. Tell.
Можно
Yes.
скажу? И мне будет сложно. Почему мы говорим о как бы, бесчеловечности запрета встреч и не говорим о бесчеловечности самого пожизненного заключения? Потому что как бы, исправительная система, она должна исправлять, по идее. Кого может исправить пожизненное заключение? И каким образом, если мы будем рассматривать это пожизненное заключение в тех условиях, в которых оно сейчас происходит? По-моему, это как бы более первичная проблема, нежели то, что мы сейчас обсуждаем.
It's a very good point. And when the representative of the Russian Federation appeared before the Grand Chamber of the European Court on the case of Poroshenko, that's the only time when you have a hearing at the Grand Chamber. This guy said, there's no goal when lifers are convicted for life, when these prisoners are convicted for life, there's no goal of correcting them. So correctional system doesn't work. Исправительная система, correctional system, should correct people. But if you have a life sentence, that means that these people are for life in the prison. You don't even give a chance. You said that it's a primer goal, primer problem. But in order to get closer to the primer problem, you have to start with a smaller one. So in the 90s, it was unthinkable to talk about challenging, canceling the capital punishment. It existed a very long time in the Soviet Union, and then suddenly, now in Europe, there are no countries where there's a capital punishment, but Belarus. They execute maybe 2-3 people per year. But look at this situation 30 years ago. Majority of the countries. The same with the states in the United States of America. It used to be all the states had a capital punishment. Now I don't know exactly, but maybe half of them. So it's all a very slow process. Initially, we started to speak about conjugal meetings. It's now allowed. Now we're talking about artificial insemination. Hopefully it will be allowed in some years to come. There is litigation going on in other countries, particularly in the United Kingdom, where Netherlands, when prisoners and their family members started to challenge life sentences. They say it's actually cruel and inhuman punishment. So it's all gradually coming.
Well, I have a question about this. I read that women can be life prisoners. I'm interested why. What's the difference?
They can't.
Yes, but why?
Why? Because a bunch of people called Gosduma in 1996 decided that it should be like this.
But why they decided it?
Well, I guess they thought of that women need to have special protection. I don't know the reason. We should look into discussion of the Gosduma, but I think that it's just somebody wrote it down and they all voted. Last year or 2 years ago, there was a case in the Grand Chamber before the European Court where a group of Russian lawyers represented a couple of lifers, and they said that this is a discrimination, that men could be convicted for life and women couldn't. European Court of Human Rights rejected this application. I can't remember right now the reasons, but I think that the European Court of Human Rights is not yet ready to start to deal with this issue of actually canceling, challenging life sentence. But this is actually a good question if you put it in a different way. Why women could not be, why, unlike with women, men could be convicted for life. I mean, I'm not a specialist in criminal law, but if you make a research, what kind of crimes are committed by women, maybe there are some crimes which could be as worse as any other crimes committed by men.
Excuse me, why these decisions take with such difficulties? Why judges afraid to take responsibility for their decisions? Or why they refused the applications?
Mm-hmm. It's very much. So we all think that judges are independent. They're never independent. They depend on higher judges, the supervision of the higher judges. They depend on the constitutional court. They depend on many other things. So like with Sablina, when the judge told me I couldn't rule otherwise before I was told to from above. That's what she said.
What about the higher levels? Why they can't take a decision?
You mean the Moscow City Court, for example?
Yeah, even the
European?
court, yes.
Why? They take different decisions.
But you told that they refused the applications.
Well, I can't know exactly the reason why the Harkin's case was rejected, but Horshenko went through. I think it's more about bureaucracy. Who was the person who put a hand on this particular case? And then I had, just 2 years ago, I had 2 cases, very much similar. It's about 2 journalists who were not allowed to the hearing of the Sablina case. And they both challenged this this situation. And one case was admitted by the European Court, another one was thrown out. I don't know why, but my guess is that these cases was considered by different human beings.
And what about Russian constitutional court? You have told that they give reasons of refusal, like Russia is not UK, and how we can understand from the logic point of view this.
It's very hard to even try to answer your question, but in the case of Sablina, do we know how many of these 19 judges of the Constitutional Court were actually recipients of the donor organs? They all the people. They probably required something. I don't know. How many of them accept collagen? And then that's a very big industry. I can't even know what are the links connected to judges. It's hard to say. But in general, judges are very much conservative. If you ask them to go against the judgment of the Constitutional Court or against the law, you put before the judge Russian law and the European Convention, and it's obvious that they contradict. In these two cases, Korolyova and Sablina, from the point of view of the lawyer, these are very good examples. It's like for a biologist, it's a very good laboratory experiment, because these two cases are very much could show you very brightly that the judge will never go against the European Convention, against the Russian law. It's very hard to ask them to apply European Convention instead of Russian law. There were a couple of judges which did this in Korolyov's case, but then higher court challenged this decision. They're always looking to what is the situation above? What does the Supreme Court think about this? Not only on papers, like Supreme Court delivered very good opinions how to deal in this kind of situation. But then when a particular case coming along, they think, oh, here's a prisoner, lifer, terrorists. No, I'm not gonna even try to. Here's the case on organ harvesting. Ooh. And you're suing head of a transplantology business.